is written in 91 AD. At the same time, there appeared in Judea an extraordinary person called Jesus, if it be lawful to call him a man. He was a famous worker of miracles, a teacher of those who were desirous of receiving the truth in simplicity, and brought over to him many disciples, both Jews and Gentiles. This was the Christ, whom Pilate, as the accusation of the princes and the great men of the nation, delivered up to the ignominious punishment of the cross, notwithstanding which those who first loved him did not forsake him. He appeared to them alive again the third day after his crucifixion, with numberless other wonders concerning him. And thence to this day there is a set of people who bear the name of Christian, as owning him for their head, Lord, and Master. My.
I'm amazed at how many Christians just jump onto this information without ever doing any type of research on the information that this gentleman is reading. He has an old book. He has many old books. And in this one, what he has is a English translation of Josephus's writings that still have the Testimonium Flavianis in it. Now, for those who don't know what the Testimonium Flavianis is, it is called that because Josephus at this time frame has become part of the Flavian family, meaning he is part of the family of Titus and Vespasian, who has now become emperor of Rome. And he is a Hellenistic Jew who is writing at the behest of Rome. Now, he is still very much Jewish, a Pharisee, I believe, at that point. So many look at it and say, oh, even he knew. He's outside biblical testimony as far as the authenticity and historicity of Jesus, the biblical version of Jesus. But we must remember two things. One, Josephus is writing this a full 60 plus years after the so-called events of Jesus actually ever happened. So he is not an eyewitness, since Josephus was born after all the events of Jesus supposedly happened. And he is not relying on, nor does he mention the works of historians at that time who spoke of this Jesus. That's the first thing we have to understand. The second thing that we have to understand is that this documentation is hotly debated and has been agreed upon by the overwhelming majority of scholars, except for your apologists, of course, and your pastors and priests. But the overwhelming majority of scholars recognize that this is at best an insertion into Josephus's work and not an original writing of Josephus. If it had been an original writing of Josephus, then people who I will mention in my next video, like Julius Africanus, people like Jerome or Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, many others would have quoted this in their histories and in their conversations and writings about Christianity as they formulated the religion into the orthodoxy that it is today. But none of these things, Josephus' Testimonium Flavianus, does not become anything mentioned until after about the 5th and 6th century CE. So most likely, no one prior to the 5th, 6th century had ever heard this Testimonium Flavianus. And when you read it in context, as Christians like to say, you come to realize that it just simply doesn't fit. And the fact that Josephus, a devout Jew who remained a devout Jew to the entirety of his life, would literally call someone the Christ. Well, let's take a look at what was written before so that we understand the context and what was written right after. So I want you to bear with me, and you may need to pause and read these for yourselves. But when you read these, this is exactly where this information is coming from. Josephus, book 18, chapter 3. The first part of chapter 3 starts out by talking about a sedition that Pilate put down. As you can see in here, it talks about how Pilate brought effigies and images of Caesar into Jerusalem, and that this was done at night, and the people were upset about it to a level where they were willing to lay down their lives in Caesarea and die instead of having their laws violated. Now, Josephus identifies himself as still remaining a Jew in this entire process when he says our laws, what he did to us. He still is letting you know that he is of the Jewish religion and that these people would take their death instead of doing this. But Pilate, he relents and says, okay, we will remove the effigy. So a year later, we have, and this is continuation, where after he removed the effigies, he's using sacred money, Pilate, to bring water from Jerusalem, water to Jerusalem, but using sacred money. This creates an entire uprising within the Jewish community. When it does so, and you guys can pause and read, it gets to a point where now they are abusing people, the people are rioting, and Pilate has to act. And in his actions, he brought his soldiers out once again. And when he brought those soldiers out, they killed a bunch of unarmed people. And then if you look at the last part, it says, were a great number of them slain by this means, and others of them ran away wounded, and thus the end was put to this sedition. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a wise man. This part is the testimonium Flavianis. It doesn't seem problematic, right? But it is, because as you read it and it gets to the end of it, and the tribe of Christians so named for him are not extinct to this day. All right. So that's kind of like an ending. Like when you read that, that kind of ends like a chapter. You know, he goes through it where he talks about Jesus supposedly being the Christ, Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, Josephus would not have said he was the Christ, would have more or less said he was called as the called Christ by his followers, as he does in other books where he mentions someone named Jesus. Now, of course, this is in English. In the Josephus writing, it is Yeshua that is mentioned here. Now, like I said, the very end seems to end, and the tribes of Christians so named for him are not extinct to this day. And then the next chapter about and I'll show you the fullness of it, where it says, about the same time, also another sad calamity put the Jews to disorder. And certain shameful practices happened about the temple of Isis that was at Rome. I will now first take notice of the wicked attempts about this temple of Isis. Do you see how the testimonium Flavianus does not fit? The testimonium Flavianus seems more like a inserted, it doesn't seem like it is, and this is what most scholars agree to, it is an inserted aspect of Josephus's work. Let me read it to you without the testimonium Flavianus. Now we're going to start at the end of chapter verses 2. Nor did they spare any of them in the least. And since the people were unarmed and were caught by men prepared for what they were about, they were a great number of them slain by this means, and others of them ran away wounded. And thus an end was put to this sedition. And about the same time, also another sad calamity put the Jews into disorder, and certain shameful practices happened about the temple of Isis that was at Rome. So as you can see, the testimonium Flavianus is a addition. Somebody inserted this after around the 5th, 6th century CE. Now I want you to join me tonight for our live. On our live on Facebook and YouTube at Deconstructing Christianity on Facebook, and at Coach Renz 33, which is also Deconstructing Christianity on YouTube. We will dive deeper into not only Josephus's work as far as book 18, but we're also going to look at the other books where he mentions other Jesuses. And you will see that Josephus in no way validate that the Jesus of the Bible is a legitimate character. So I look forward to it. See you guys at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on live online. Peace.